conclusions that's well known, and it's applied in video games.
All the time.
Yes, I've been an inclusion is in video games. So.
Yeah, it's the effect that an object has on the pathway of the sound.
Okay.
So in video games, yes, you have.
So it's the same concept as in video games.
Exactly.
Okay.
Same one.
That makes sense then. Okay.
Same one.
Just apply the sound instead of light.
Has nothing to do, but just connecting back to the beginning of our previous discussion. How do you deal with the notion of presence in sculpture, where with, for example, 3D printing, where basically the sculpture acquire the same kind of notation, you know, 3D printing, you can have the data for the sculpture as data, basically. You have sculpture as data, so how do you deal with the notion of presence when the sculpture is a data?
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the work of Andrew Scott, the question of scalability of 3D sculpture. You have your 3D model, and it can be used to output and to generate an object that big, as big as the building. Yeah. But at one point, it's decided. Well, no, and Andrew Scott does not decide, because he keeps making different variations of the same object at different sizes, and they have different presences. So let's go back to 6300 and the feedback on the subjective synthesis that was completely missed last week because of technical failure on my behalf. And today it works, and I can see it working. Yeah, that's good. And
is the sound high enough?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So the question was about 3D audio, augmented reality, virtual reality, and expanded cinema. And so we've been looking at the presentations and trying to comment on this presentation and what was in here. And one of the important questions was the question of sound, and how to represent sound in a 3D immersive environment, which is something completely different from how to represent sound in film, for example, and even in surround sound. And what we said last week was, I'm sorry, I don't know why people drink when they cough, because it does nothing. Except that it can even make things dangerous. So the question of sound, and it's a very interesting question, and maybe we need to address the question that is almost a philosophical question about sound, which is, where is sound when you hear sound? And there's three, and we'll see that we can then boil that down to two. There's three possible locations for sound. Sound is located at the point of emission of the sound, which is located at the sound object. And the second one is sound is traveling in the space between the sound object and the listener. And the third one is sound is located in the listener's head, and it's what the listener is hearing. And depending upon the three views of sound, well, there's three different and more than three different ways of recreating the sensation of a sound object in a space. And these things are also connected to the position of the spectator and to the type of experience. So it's different to be immersed in a virtual environment than to be a spectator in a film. So today what's going on is the only thing that we can do is to model the listener. Basically, we do everything in the framework of the third option, which is sound is located within the listener. All of the systems of recording of sounds are systems of modeling the listener. And that's a strong limitation and creates a lot of problem. The number one problem is when you have more than one listener in the same environment, you will need to have more than one models of the soundscape for each individual listeners, which is technically not feasible. The only thing that can be done, so you can never capture an entire auditory scene and make it available to several listeners with different positions in the space. That's impossible. No one does that today. What we can do today is capture individual sound and localize them individually for different listeners. And that's the only thing that we can do. And some systems have the capacity of doing that up to, I must think, between 32 and 64 different sound sources, which is probably enough. But it's impossible. It doesn't take into account the the reality of the space. So that we cannot do, and there's probably some research to be done on the technological side on how to capture a sound field and not how to capture sound waves. Okay, that's what we're doing. We're capturing sound waves in a position that tries to be as close as possible to the position of the listener, where instead we should try to capture the sound field, the entire field. And there's nothing in any research papers about that. Well, there's one thing which is called wave field synthesis. That is a technique that can be used to create an auditory environment, an auditory field. And it can be also done to capture an auditory field, and it's done with an array of microphones to capture and an array of speakers to diffuse these kind of things. So right now, one of my colleagues in electrical engineering is working on that, but he's not trying to capture a sound field, he's trying to do that to improve the quality of individual sources in noisy environment. Because the idea is that instead of just looking at the sound wave, you're looking at the field and you're looking at the different position of the wave of one individual sound in that field, and that allows you to extract that wave. So for example, you want to extract a noise from a voice from a noisy environment. So you're using several microphones to capture the field, and from the images brought by these several microphones, by comparison between each of them, you can actually extract with a better accuracy the voice itself. The primary use of that is de-reverb a sound. Yeah, when you have someone talking in a highly reverberant environment, you can use that to remove the reverberation and to get only the direct sound. So that's possibly one thing to be done, is to look into that kind of technique to record the sound field. And use the same, so wave field synthesis should be used to do the same thing, the projection in the room. The problem of that is that it's really expensive, because to create a consistent sound field in a room, you need a minimum of 60 loudspeakers, and then you have to calibrate all of these speakers, and so it's quite expensive, and it's not and it will not be available for commercial applications soon. So, but we'll see. That's one of the possibilities. And we have also, I think, the same problem with the visual aspect of it. Same thing with the visual aspect of 3D virtual reality. It looks like what we are modeling is not the space itself, but it's the vision of the spectator upon or within that space. And I think that we have a hard time. It looks to me like there's a conceptual gap that keeps us from really completely being able to model a space, would it be an optical or acoustical space. I think we are still on that old paradigm of space being an empty vessel in which objects are placed, and that we will be experiences by means of vision. I think we should think of space in different terms. And maybe if we start thinking about space in different terms, we will be able to go to different ways of modeling space and then simulating space for virtual reality. Right now, what I tend to say is that what we need is to at least incorporate the latest research done on ecological psychology into virtual reality. And that's not completely done. Mark Hansen was the author I was looking for last week. Mark Hansen talks about the importance of bringing in elements of ecological psychology into the discussion about the virtual reality, but he cautions at the same time to make sure to bring in the whole concepts associated with ecological psychology and not to limit that to what has been done in the past, which is really a reduction of ecological psychology to the main concept of affordances. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept.
I heard about it, but if you don't mind.
Affordance. So that's all of that comes from James Gibson.
Yeah.
And the idea that mainly his philosophy about the senses is to say that the senses, well, first of all, are attuned to the environment and attuned to the kind of information that they are looking for in the environment. And one of the key things that he says is that the senses do not receive incomplete information by chance. Says that the senses go after rich information by means of intention. Says that perceiving in an environment is always something that is deliberate and intentional, and that the information that is gathered by the senses is a rich information. He doesn't believe in what is called indirect perception, in which the information is weak
And
is processed by the brain by the use of memory to give and create a richer information. So in that, he says that one of the key factors of perceiving in the environment is to detect affordances. And affordances says its meaning that is directly attached to perceptual invariance. So perceptual invariant is a flat horizontal surface that affords for sitting. It's a chair. Or so everything in the environment, instead of being described by other thing, is described by what it affords to me as a living creature in this environment. And that is what Mark Hansen says, that we should not limit the integration of ecological psychology
The concept
to
of
affordances,
affordances.
but we should very much open it to that whole idea that perception in an environment is always a flow of events. Perception is never static. Perception is always perception of change, and perception is always happening in movement, in motion, and in intention. There's no stills, no still images, and there's no still sound. That does not exist. Sound is always moving.
But the intention can be unconscious.
Yeah,
Okay.
but definitely, and I think that's one of the things that's probably missing in virtual environments, that whole idea of, well, a virtual space is meant to be explored,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also a space that's meant to have a relationship with the people who are exploring it. I think there's no possibility of exploration of a completely unknown space. Doesn't work.
But one of the, I mean, don't you think that one of the issue that people or even anyone could raise is the issue of anthropomorphism? What I mean by that is, how would you create a sound landscape for a space that nobody knows how it sounds or shapes? I mean, virtual environment, nobody knows. I mean,
Yeah.
it does exist, but it does not exist actually. So the only thing we can do is to simulate a sort
Real,
of a real world. So we're taking something, I mean, we're taking elements that we already know, and we replace them there. But there's no way to do otherwise. I mean, maybe there is one, but how do we get out from these issues of anthropomorphism? And I mean, is it a bad thing to create to model a spectator rather than a world that we don't even know how it would look like?
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing just to model a spectator.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that if we model the spectator, we need to model the spectator within the environment.
Okay.
I think that what we're doing right now is incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
We're modeling a strictly abstract viewer
Mm-hmm.
and we are using a very primitive model, like we adequate the system of vision
Mm-hmm.
to one camera.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of 3D environments, we adequate the vision to two cameras with a slight parallax between the two of them, and that's
Mhm.
how we reconstruct the perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're going into a more ecological modeling,
Mm-hmm.
vision, it's a head that's moving,
Mm-hmm.
two eyes, a nose,
Mm-hmm.
and a body that
Mhm.
has locomotion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not integrate all of that into vision, what you're modeling is not human vision. It's robotic vision. Yeah, that's...
And what was it, the lack of the nose? How really it's like messes with things.
Well, yeah, it has an importance on the perception of distance. Distance of objects. And the movement, your head is almost constantly in motion when you're looking. And it's not for that the image is moving. And what you see so often in video games and maybe in VR is every time you move your head, the image moves, which is not true. The image that you see as a flow of event is
Well,
not
but
moving.
The buildings don't move if you're looking at the buildings. If you look and see them at your side, that's what's different about it. I mean, you look away, they're still there. You're
Yeah.
going to see them in your peripheral vision.
Uh-huh.
They're not
Yeah.
going to move with you.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's what's different.
And so there needs to there's a need for more complex modeling of the human perceptual system
Yeah.
to be incorporated of this. To me, it looks to me that VR is just an improvement of optical technology, and it's not anything else than another way of recording with a more complex camera or set of cameras. I mean, and that's why I think it does not fail. That's why I think it's a little bit disappointing in terms of possibilities. And that's also something that would have, I think, important consequences on our possibilities to invent new ways of telling stories in these spaces. If we stick with the paradigm of improvement of the camera, we will just try to make stories like in films with just slight changes being presented by the possibility of being a witness or not of any given action. But if we really want to see a big change in the way of telling stories, we need to introduce a big change in the way to model spaces for these environments.
Is it possible, is there any place, room for a tool that will combine both? For example, we talked about it last time, the sense of touch with the sense of hearing?
Yeah.
Or they will be exclusive? Maybe that if you try to integrate the sense of touch, you lost the sense of hearing. Is there any tool that can combine that?
No, at the moment. There's one tool that allows to simulate the sense of touch with infrasounds, but that's it. By the way, there's a very good book about virtual reality. It's from the 50s. It's that Boy Casares book,
Like?
The Invention of Morel. That's the name of the book. Boy Casares, The Invention of Morel. And it's the story, it's a beautiful book. It's the story of a guy who lands on an island. And he starts seeing people and hearing them and all of that. But basically the whole story is that on that island someone has invented a way to record life. And that guy is playing in a loop the last days of the life on this island. And
on this island?
Yeah. The last days of life on this island is being replayed.
How is it possible?
Huh?
He's replaying the last day of life on this island?
Yeah, everyone is dead.
Oh, you mean of him alive with the other people?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a machine that's playing that always, and the guy who landed on the island is puzzled by that, and obviously he falls in love with one of the recorded women, and that's but that's an interesting thing.
Made me think at the same time this book by Michel Tournier called Friday,
Vendredi,
or the Limbs
Les Limbs
of
du Pacifique.
the Pacific.
Yeah,
Where
that's
it's Yeah.
the same story.
It's kind of the same when you basically lose the contact with other people and you even lose, the use of language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Every kind, all your senses kind of reconnect,
Yeah.
and you
mhm.
become like
Yeah.
part of the
No,
whole
that's
nature.
and that's really oh shit, it's already time. The theme of the island.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very interesting one. There's also a wonderful book by Umberto Eco called The Island of the Day Before, which also talks about that, which is because to me I cannot escape from imagining virtual reality and connected it to a recording. I cannot, that's me, I cannot conceive of images that do not relate to the past. I will need to get out of this because it's not real anymore with computer generated images. They do not belong to the past. They are not recordings. They are generated in real time. But I don't know. Every time I see an image, I see the past. And I wonder if virtual reality goes against that, if it's an image of the present or not.
I think tying back into the ecological model, I think that's one of the biggest problems with vision.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice it particularly in film because the camera creates depth of field in the recording